Hello everyone, my name is Maggie and I'm a 4th semester occupational therapy student here at Concordia University. This webinar focuses on Certified Ergonomics Assessment Specialists, or CEAS. For this webinar, there are 4 learning objectives. The information needed to meet these objectives will be included throughout the following slides, and at the end of the webinar, there will be a brief assessment for me to measure how effectively these objectives were met. You should have a handout with some fill-in-the-blanks to complete throughout the presentation. The information on this handout will be helpful for the assessment, so I would recommend using it. It also includes some additional information and references that may be helpful if you are interested in learning more about how to become a CEAS. The learning objectives are the following. 1. Listeners will describe the role of a Certified Ergonomics Assessment Specialist. 2. Listeners will identify the steps required to becoming a Certified Ergonomic Assessment Specialist. 3. Listeners will be able to give examples of various settings or locations where a Certified Ergonomic Assessment Specialist can practice. And 4. Listeners will be able to summarize the benefits of becoming a Certified Ergonomic Assessment Specialist. These objectives are written on your handout as well. In 2020, private industry employers reported 2.7 million non-fatal workplace injuries and illnesses. 75% of workplace injuries are caused by exposure to harmful substances or environments, overexertion or bodily reactions, or slips, trips, and falls. Take a moment to consider what types of jobs you think would have the highest numbers of workplace injuries. You can answer this question on your handout. These injuries occur in a wide variety of careers, from nurses to truck drivers to retail workers. In fact, in 2020, over 1/3 of all workplace injuries occurred in 10 occupations. These are nursing assistants, licensed practical or vocational nurses, registered nurses, laborers and freight, stock, and material movers, truck drivers, maintenance and repair workers, stockers and order fillers, and retail salespeople. Although it is likely that the high number of workplace injuries or illnesses within the nursing population is higher than usual because of the pandemic, it is still interesting to see up-to-date information about which professions are most impacted by workplace injuries and illnesses. These statistics show us that workplace injuries are clearly an issue. How can we, as future occupational therapists, work to improve these numbers? Take a moment to answer this question on your handout, or just think about it if you would prefer. Before we can talk about the role that occupational therapy plays in ergonomics, it's important to understand what this word actually means. Ergonomics can be defined a few different ways. According to the American Occupational Therapy Association's Ergonomic Fact Sheet from 2017, ergonomics promotes a holistic approach in which considerations of physical, cognitive, social, organizational, environmental, and other relevant factors are taken into account. The role of occupational therapy in this field is to optimize function of an individual or group of individuals by adapting the environment in which they must interact. According to the Back School, ergonomics is defined as an applied science concerned with designing and arranging things people use so that the people and things interact most effectively and safely. In both of these definitions, there is a focus on the ways that people and environment interact. AOTA lists 3 primary benefits of having an OT practicing in ergonomics. The first of these is that occupational therapists can conduct assessments and develop interventions for individual workers, or provide health promotion and injury prevention education programs for groups of workers. AOTA provides examples, including providing visual aids for a person with limited organizational skills following a traumatic brain injury, or providing training about how to do common tasks in ergonomically safe ways. The second way is by designing and modifying workplace tools, equipment, and behaviors to prevent injury. AOTA provides examples of this, including making recommendations to move heavy bags by sliding them onto work surfaces of equal heights rather than lifting them, or by customizing keyboard setups for each individual worker. The final way that AOTA mentions is that OTs can consult with employers and insurance companies to develop programs that could reduce workers' compensation costs and promote workplace wellness. These could include strategies to address the needs of aging workers or identify injury risk factors and strategies to reduce exposure for specific job categories or populations in the workplace. Now that we all have a better understanding of what ergonomics is, why it's so important, and the role that occupational therapy can play in this area, it's time to look more specifically at the role of a certified ergonomics assessment specialist. The role of a CEAS is to perform a workplace ergonomic analysis in order to identify potential hazards and promote workplace safety. This relates to the first benefit of OT identified by AOTA on slide 6, which involves performing ergonomics assessments within the workplace. Now that we are all familiar with the role of a CEAS, how can you receive this certification? For this webinar, I will be focusing on a CES certification program through the Back School. This is an ergonomics-focused company centered on back injury prevention that provides live workshops and online courses to receive ergonomic certifications, including CEAS. I have included a brief description of each of these options on this slide, but I will get more into the requirements of each of these programs on the next couple slides. Please take a moment to read over the brief outline included here. This program is designed for a variety of people. Health workers, including physical therapists, physical therapy assistants, physical therapy students, occupational therapists, occupational therapy assistants, occupational therapy students, certified hand therapists, athletic trainers, registered nurses, or nurse practitioners may all benefit from completing the CEAS training. Other careers, including certified safety professionals, risk managers, claims managers, safety committee members, human resource professionals, industrial engineers, industrial hygienists, ergonomists, chiropractors, or office furniture salespeople may also benefit from this certification. Additionally, anyone wanting to learn how to decrease risk of on-site employee injury and increase employee productivity and satisfaction is able to take this course. To complete the online course from the Back School, you would first need to register for the course and pay the enrollment fee. Once you are enrolled and actually begin the course, the following requirements need to be met to receive the certification. You would need to view all presentations and modules required for the online course. Then, you would need to take a 100-question exam and pass with at least a 90%. After passing the exam, you would need to complete 2 ergonomic assessments based on videos. One of these would need to be a video from an office setting, while one would need to be from an industrial or healthcare setting. These would be completed using the OSHA Ergonomics risk factor checklists and compiling a Worksite Ergonomic Analysis Report, or WARE, for each video. These are assessments that someone working in ergonomics as a CEAS would use to complete their workplace analysis. I will be focusing more on these assessments later in this presentation. Lastly, to complete the online course to become a CEAS, you would need to write your final reports. The process for the in-person hybrid workshop is similar to the online course, with the only difference being that instead of viewing presentations and modules, you would need to attend 11 hours of class time to complete individual and group work. Then you would complete a 100-question exam, 2 ergonomics assessments based on videos, and write your final reports online. The online work is intended to take about 4 hours. The process for the fully in-person workshop is the most different from the other 2 options. This is a 2-day workshop involving 15 hours of class time to complete individual and group work. There is no online portion to this class. You would still be required to complete 2 ergonomic assessments in order to receive your certification through the in-person class. Now that we have covered what a CEAS does and how to become a CEAS, let's think about where you might actually want to work once receiving the certification. According to AOTA, occupational therapy practitioners working in ergonomics may be employed by or contracted to employers, insurance companies, medical facilities, case management companies, consulting firms, and engineering firms, or they may be self-employed. Settings that they can work include office settings, industrial settings such as a factory, or healthcare settings such as a hospital. For the remainder of this presentation, we will be focusing primarily on applying this information within an office setting. This video shows an occupational therapist performing a quick ergonomics assessment in an office setting. Pay attention to the type of things the therapist looks for while she is completing her assessment. We will do some examples after applying some of these areas after watching the video.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm the occupational therapist as part of the team of Coastal Physiotherapy. What we're looking at today is to give you some pointers on workstation setup and the ergonomics of your workstation. So if you are complaining of neck pain, headaches, tightness in your shoulders, tightness in your lower back, any of those complaints can often be directly attributed to the way that your workstation ergonomics are in your place of employment. So Diane here is one of our receptionists in the morning. She's going to be our model for today. What I'm just going to point out today are some key pointers for your workstation ergonomics. This is a fairly average type of workstation. There are a lot of variables, so I can't go into all of the variables today. It would just take too long. So what I'm going to do is just give you a couple of key points so that you can go back and have a look at your own workstation and hopefully be able to improve your workstation. So the first thing you want to do when you're doing a workstation is to take a look at your chair. An ergonomic chair will allow you to adjust the height up and down. It will also allow the backrest to be changed in the angle for you to fit your lower back. So I'm not going to adjust Diane's chair today, but what you want to make sure when you're thinking about the height of the chair is make sure that you raise it up high enough so that your forearms here, your wrists, are actually slightly lower than your elbows. If you find that your chair is too low, you'll end up typing with your elbows at an angled position, which puts a lot of stress through the musculoskeletal tissues of your upper limb. So what we would do is raise you up. If you raise up and your feet are dangling and you can't touch the floor, then you need to get a small footrest to put in underneath your feet. So once you've set your chair up into the correct position, that's when we'll actually look at the rest of your workstation. The main key points that we need to look at is your mouse, your telephone if you use the telephone a lot, the computer, as well as the keyboard. So the first thing that you want to do with your keyboard is make sure if you do take notes in your work environment that your notes are kept to the side, if you can just move that die over there, and that you actually bring your keyboard right to the edge of the desk. It should be about 6 to 8 centimetres from the edge of the desk, which is typically this wrist support that you see here. That will give you a nice position without having to stretch with your arms. The next thing you want to do is to have a look at your workstation. For the average focal distance of a 19-inch screen, this one's actually bigger than the average length for a computer monitor, is if you can wheel yourself nice and tight into the workstation die, if you can just sit up straight and place your hands out front without coming too far forward. This is roughly the distance that your computer screen should be. If it's further away than that, you will find that your neck starts to drift so that you can see your workstation. This one is allowed to be a little bit further back because it's larger than that 19-inch, so it accommodates for that slightly different focal length. The other thing you want to have a look at is the height of your computer monitor. As this computer monitor is at the moment, Di needs to actually look down with her neck. Holding your neck in that forward position for an 8-hour period will lead to a lot of tightness up the back of the neck muscles going through into the shoulder. So a simple way to do this without spending any money is just the provision of a phone book or something. You can actually slot this underneath here and that will raise that up. What you're looking for is the top of the computer screen to be at the same level as your eye. So for Di, that would be raising it up probably the height of a local directory. Okay, the last thing that we want to look at today is the position of the mouse. You want to make sure that the mouse is not too far away. If you stretch out to that as if you needed to use that, you can see the stretch that actually occurs through the elbow and the shoulder. What we want to do is make that much more natural and bring that in nice and close, and that's what we call your zone of frequent reach. The zone of frequent reach is when you're sitting up nice and straight, you've got a straight back, your elbows are by your side. If you were to do this, then everything that you access on a frequent basis throughout the workday, you should be able to access. So that includes your keyboard, your mouse, and your telephone. So those are some key pointers that you can go back to your workstation to have a look at. If you've got other problems, there are things that do fit outside of the norm, and you might need a more comprehensive assessment to have a look at those type of factors.
Take a moment to write down any ideas that you may have identified as being important
Hi, I'm
to
Nicole.
look out for while watching this video. Take a look at this office worker. With the information that you got from the video, what ergonomic concerns do you notice? What do you notice that demonstrates good ergonomics? Feel free to write these down on your handout or just reflect on these ergonomic factors in your head. For the next few slides, we will be using the OSHA risk factors checklist that I mentioned earlier as being part of the course requirements for becoming a CEAS. You should have a copy of this document attached in your handout. We will be using the first page of the document to assess a few different pictures of various office settings. The following video goes over each checklist item so that you know what to look for.
So now let's talk a little bit about workplace ergonomic evaluations and injury prevention. If you're providing ergonomic evaluations to a company, usually your goal is to reduce that company's losses related to workplace injury. You're going to want to start with looking for risk factors in the workplace. Risk factors include repetitive movements, like someone on an assembly line doing the same thing over and over and over again all day long. Forceful movements, like extensive lifting, gripping, pushing. Awkward postures, either for a long time or repetitively. Think about the body mechanics we just talked about for lifting, or maybe a plumber who has to crawl around on their knees all the time, or a secretary who has to look off to their side of their monitor on and off all day. Excessive vibration. We mentioned the use of power tools earlier, but this is also a concern for people who drive for considerable amounts of their job. Extreme temperatures. I remember when I used to work in food service, I hated doing inventory because you'd have to stand in the freezer for extended periods of time. And contact stress, which is pressing a body part against an edge or a surface, like a chef whose knife maybe isn't sharp enough, or someone who types it for a long period of time during the day, resting their arms on the edge of their desk. These are the kinds of things you're going to want to be on the lookout for and trying to.
Now I will be giving you the chance to try out
Now let's talk a little bit about workplace ergonomic.
To try out using the OSHA checklist for the following 3 images. Because we are only looking at pictures, you will not be able to answer yes or no to every item on the checklist, so focus on the items that you can assess and that are relevant to an office setting. Feel free to write your answers on the checklist or to just go through the list in your mind while viewing each picture. There is also room on your handout if you would like to take notes there. Page 3 of this checklist document includes the risk factor guide that you saw a couple slides ago. Take as long as you need to complete this activity. I will give you some time on each slide, but feel free to pause the webinar if you feel that you need more time. These pictures are all included on your handout as well if you would prefer to look there. Now we can go over what items you checked off yes or no on the checklist. So on this slide, I have highlighted the checklist items that are most relevant to each of the pictures. Over the next few slides, I will be sharing what I identified as being concerns for ergonomics based on those pictures. Feel free to compare what you identified to what I identified and see how similar they were. So for this first picture, I assumed that all of the workers would be typing and using a mouse frequently, so I said yes for high repetition tasks for each of the pictures. For the first picture, the worker was leaning very far forward in his chair, causing him to be in an awkward position for his head or neck, back, elbow extension, and hip flexion. It also appeared that his desk was the incorrect height for him, as his elbows were flexed past 90 degrees, but this is also influenced by the way that he's sitting, so it makes it difficult to tell for sure. Elbow abduction and wrists seem to have been in good positions, and he does not appear to have to reach far or to awkward heights to complete his job. If I were completing this checklist for real at an actual site, I would fill out every single yes or no option, so I would have checked no for all of the options that aren't highlighted, but for the purposes of this webinar, I only included the relevant items. The second worker had excellent office ergonomics. Her desk and chair appeared to be at appropriate heights, and she did not display any obvious, awkward body mechanics. Again, I assumed that she would be typing and using the mouse frequently throughout the day, which is why I did say yes for high repetition tasks, but no for everything else. The third worker had decent ergonomics, but there were a few concerns that were still present. Because she is using a laptop, it is difficult for her hands and head or neck to both be in proper ergonomically safe positions. If the laptop is at the appropriate height for her hands, then her neck is likely straining by looking down, and if it's at an appropriate height for her head, then it's likely that her elbows are flexed past 90 degrees and her wrists are in an awkward position. Additionally, she has her laptop off to the side. Because of the location of her laptop, her head or neck would have been in an awkward position, and her elbow may need to be abducted awkwardly. Additionally, she is leaning forward in her chair slightly, causing her back to be in an awkward position. From what I can tell in the picture, everything else appeared to be good, with good body mechanics, and the table appeared to be a good height for her. Now that we have covered information about certified ergonomic assessment specialists and have completed some of our own ergonomics assessments, reflect on some of the benefits that the certification might have. I will be providing examples in a moment. And feel free to write these down on your handout as well. So one benefit of becoming a CEAS would be reducing workplace injuries in whatever setting you are working in. Another benefit for a company might be reduced workers' compensation costs due to that reduction in workplace injuries. A benefit for you as the therapist would be that you receive more education into this topic and become more qualified to work in a variety of settings. Let's review what we went over in this webinar. We reviewed the definition of ergonomics and the role that an occupational therapist can play in this area. You have learned about the role of a CEAS. You have also learned about the steps to become a CEAS. You have learned about the settings where an occupational therapist with the certification can practice. We have reviewed videos and pictures, examples of ergonomics assessments. We have practiced using the OSHA Ergonomics Assessment Checklist. Lastly, you have reflected on the benefits of becoming a CEAS. You should have a link to my webinar's final learning objective assessment. This should be linked on your handout. If you want to pause the video here and take that assessment now, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you are welcome to take it after the final activity. Either way, please remember to take the assessment so that I can measure how well each learning objective was met. Thank you for your cooperation. On this final slide, I have included 3 different graphics that came with the presentation template that I chose for this webinar. As I was creating the presentation, I couldn't help but notice a few ergonomic related concerns with each of these images. Feel free to take a look at these images on your handout if you'd like. With that, I would like to thank you for watching my webinar. Hopefully, you are able to learn a lot. References and some helpful links are included on your handout if you are interested in learning more. Thank you for watching.